they captured 3 Patagonians, unfortunately. None of those Patagonians survived to return to Europe, right? So we don't have remains, we don't have a skeleton of an 11-foot tall Patagonian person, right? It's why we need to, I guess, think critically about that element of it. But again, a structural element, I think, of European expansion is this idea that human beings, if they're not European, definitely if they're not Christian, are kind of fair game to be claimed for later study. And to be moved around the world for observation and study. Another structural element is the description that indigenous people, local peoples, think that Europeans are gods. And again, it's something that becomes typological. As you read the history of colonialism by non-Iberians, by the English, by the French, by the Dutch, this is a recurring theme, so that it becomes expected. It's written about a lot, but we have to, I think, be a little dubious about it, right? Because there are these other reasons why it's present that we need to really be clear that that's what's going on. What I've got here is that the Philippines I see kind of as a transitional or liminal space. Liminal in the sense that its peoples, its polities are seen, they're different from the polities of the Americas, at the same time that they're also different from other polities in Asia. What do I mean by that? Is that these Pacific islands that Magellan, the remnants of Magellan's crew move into and interact with, those folks are not pagan, right? Those folks are Muslim, and those rulers are Muslim. And again, that places them in a different category, right? What I'm going to say is, right, we often think of the dichotomy between the old world and the new world when we think about European expansion. I think this is a really good space for me to just urge you to think that definitely European expansion in this zone is about the meeting of 2 old worlds, right? That there's a complex process through which monarchies and polities have become Muslim, have become Islamic, and are connected to a broader Islamic world of trade and politics and religion, of course. And Europeans are expanding into that world, and they're doing it in a way that's distinct from how Europeans have done it and are doing it in the Americas. The last point that I have here is that staple goods are really crucially important. We tend to think of staple goods as, I don't know, right, gold. We tend to think of silver. We can think of tobacco. We definitely can think of sugar. In Asia and in this zone of Asia, the staple item spices were really crucially and centrally important. Again, that there were established routes and ways for Europeans to get spices before 1453. Those routes get disrupted, and this is part of the process of establishing routes and acquiring spices that were a part of the experience. All right, so the expedition moves from the Philippines, which is up there, to the Moluccas, right, or the Spice Islands, which are in the center of this frame. And they kind of run here, right? We're looking here at what's now Indonesia. I'll show you other maps that can situate you and orient you towards Borneo and Malaysia, and then, right, ultimately India is that way. These islands become crucially important because of the cloves that are grown there, right? They're ground zero for the production of spices, specifically cloves. And Pigafetta, again, has a map and an image of the tree and the bush that produces those cloves, right? So it's intriguing. Historians of the Americas might be oriented and primed to think around staples being different kinds of products of the earth. Asian trade really was, in one important way, oriented around the acquisition and the movement of spices. You can imagine how long it would take to fill a ship with cloves, and the value of those cloves, right? The ability to pack large amounts that had increasing layers of value added to them the closer you got back to Europe, right? That there is, I think it's one of the powerful elements of expansion and colonialism, is the accrual of value as distance is factored in. This is just a Google Maps image of those spice islands in a closer frame. Gives you a sense of the effect of European expansion and activity. Is that, sorry, that was me. These two islands actually ally themselves and affiliate themselves with different European powers, right? They're right next to each other. They're both spice-producing islands. They orient themselves, Ternate is oriented with the Portuguese, Tidor, and the ruler of Tidor is open to and interacts with Magellan's crew, right? It's one of the, again, a structural element of colonialism is that it provides opportunities, right? It provides trade opportunities. It kind of also does orient local communities and local polities around European rivalries, right? You can see how the ruler of Tidor has an opportunity to operate as an independent actor in a world that includes the Spanish and the Portuguese competing against one another. And throughout his explorations and explorations after, right, colonialist expansionists from Spain know that if they want to find a safe harbor, the place that they go, and the place that they go to get cloves is Tidor, and they want to avoid Ternate, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that in the same way that the book of European colonialism in this phase includes an American wing, or something that's happening in the Americas as well as Asia, there are Spanish players and there are Portuguese players, that dichotomy, and the reason why I stress it, also does orient non-Europeans around those polarities. And that becomes really determinative. It can lead to rivalries and, enmities and violence that are sparked by European expansion. This is a map from the 1570s of that same region, right? So these Spice Islands, the Moluccas, are here. Right, this is Indonesia, Malaya and Malaysia. The town of Malacca, I'll call it, is here. What I really like this map for, and what I'm stressing now, is the importance of this strait. Right, the Strait of Magellan is really important for navigating the globe. This is also a really important strait for the movement of people, the movement of pilgrims. In this Islamic zone, people moving to Mecca, and also the mercantile movement of goods, right? If I can take us back to that pre-circumnavigation moment, the Battle of Malacca that I had on that earlier slide was to control this strait, right? That the Portuguese in 1511 send out 10,000 men to conquer that city at that strategic point in order to provide a chokehold, really, on the movement of ships, the movement of goods, and the movement of people through that strait. And you can kind of see, right, what the strait is oriented towards is the Bay of Bengal, again, right, which is up here, India up here, and a really rich and interconnected trade zone, an oceanic trade zone. So part of what the Portuguese are doing is establishing control. Again, they don't conquer the Malayan Peninsula, right? What they do is they they conquer a strategic port and a strategic entry point that allows them to control the movement of ships, the movement of goods, and the movement of people through that strait. This is, I guess, a clearer map, a modern map of this space and of this place. I'll just point to, right, that this is the zone of this. These are, let's call them the Spice Islands. Philippines there, Indonesia now, and the strait is there. Each of these places in the early modern period was associated with individual ruling families and ruling polities, which the Portuguese and Europeans were either allying with or contending with. Again, the real take-home point, the point that I'm making, is that Portuguese activity and the Portuguese Empire, such as it exists here, is not about spreading Portuguese people or Portuguese soldiers across these islands. It's a really punctuated and strategic way of viewing control and being able to control access and derive income from controlling the movement of ships and people throughout this zone. All right, so this is my, in some ways, I do tend to see the importance of European empires as organized around the control and the movement of goods and people. So Magellan is a representative of the process of just opening, right? That the Portuguese had been moving into Asia from the direction around Africa. What Magellan adds that's really powerful is the opposite route, right? An alternate entry point and access point to those markets in Asia. Really powerful, right? Being able to say, if you're a Spaniard and you have designs or interests in Asia, right, that you have a way to get to Asia that avoids that treaty line. Really important. Panama becomes a really important choke point in these world empires, and